Every day, you and I get bombarded with negative news. And just like our bodies becomes what we eat, our minds become the information that we consume. If you want to stay positive, it's so important that you also listen to stories that inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we interview world-leading experts dedicated to solving the world's most pressing problems. And if you stick around, I promise you will not only be as informed as if you watch the news, you will feel uplifted, inspired, and have more positive energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with. Hi and welcome. Today Great.com talks with Adam Kesselman, who is the Executive Director for the Ecoliteracy Center, or the Center for Ecoliteracy. And if you haven't heard of them before, they exist to promote education for sustainable living in primary schools and in secondary schools. And if you're new here into this podcast, you definitely want to press subscribe, either on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we're going to explore how we can live more sustainably. So Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you, Emil. Nice to be here with you today.
So how would you describe the center for someone that is not familiar with your organization?
The Center for Ecoliteracy is a Berkeley, California-based nonprofit organization focused on promoting education for sustainability in kindergarten through 12th grade in the United States, which is primary and secondary schools. And ultimately, we seek to create a world where students experience and understand how nature sustains life and are inspired to live in ways that benefit people and the environment.
That is so necessary and in time, I must
Yeah.
say. So is that something that's happening kind of in school, or is it more like an after-school program?
So we're a systems thinking organization, and so we try to influence the space of K-12 education from within and from outside. So we work with school districts throughout California primarily, although our work is really focused on K-12, kind of more broadly speaking. So we create curricula. We've published many books over the past 25 years that we've been in existence. And we work with a network of school districts to influence, currently we're working on food systems change in schools as well. So we're seeking to connect education in the cafeteria, the classroom, and the garden. And, most recently, I'd say over the past 4 or 5 years, we've gotten into policy work. And, that's a very powerful lever to create change on a large scale. And so we're sort of coming at primary and secondary education from different angles. And that real systems view, we're working on all the systems that impact students and how they learn and what they learn, and how that happens in school.
Interesting. And I want to ask more questions about food system change and policy change later in this episode. But for someone that is not familiar with the term, what does system thinking and system change mean to you?
That's a good question. Systems thinking really takes into context networks, patterns, and flows. And so our work really looks at ecological systems and the interconnectedness of everything in terms of how we create our curricula and how we see the world. So ultimately, everything's connected. Sort of the antithesis of that is a mechanistic view that, if you do X, you get Y, and there's no extraneous impacts to the broader system. And so, you might look at, I don't know, I have an 18-month-old daughter, and I'm really interested in how we use language to describe the world around us. And, she likes to throw things in the garbage. And so, if you think about throwing things away, it doesn't think about where they go after you put it into the trash can. And a systems view you would teach a child that it's not just going into the garbage and you're forgetting about it, that has an impact, and then it goes into a different system, a broader system, and it has an impact on our environment.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because if there's anything I have picked up after interviewing quite a few different types of environmental organizations, is that a lot of the problems like animal suffering and climate change, they all come together and form a system. So help me understand then, when you're teaching students this, what kind of outcomes are you hoping to achieve? That they become generally more aware, or that they take some kind of action? What is the goal?
Ultimately, we want students to understand that they're part of a bigger system, and that their choices impact their community and the world around them. And a choice that you make today can have an impact for a long time into the future. We have 4 guiding principles in our work, and this might explain a little bit more about how we approach our work and our values. So the first is that nature is our teacher. So we look to nature for the lessons around systems thinking and systems change, that everything's connected, and you can look into nature and you can see it everywhere. Secondly, sustainability is a community practice. So our work really, seeks to engage the broader community and to teach that your actions affect a community, whether it's the community in your classroom, the community in your town, or the community in the world. And ultimately, we want students to grow up with the understanding that they're part of a community and that the choices they make impact that community. Thirdly, the real world is the optimal learning environment. So, the lessons that we create are focused on real world hands-on learning and examples. So I mentioned food systems change. While we're working on changing the food in schools, we're also creating curricula that educates students about where their food comes from and how it reaches the table. And, that's a real world example of systems in play. And the last is ecological literacy is rooted in a deep knowledge of place. And the center has valued place since its founding. And one of the first organizations that we funded, we were a funding organization in the early days. We're not now, but one of the first projects was called the Straw Project, and it stands for Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed. And it focused on restoring watersheds on agricultural land in Northern California, in Marin and Sonoma County. And that that organization is still flourishing. It's also, I think this is its 25th or 26th year. So bringing kids out into nature, into the place that they live, and it may be 20 minutes away. I went to a straw project restoration that was just outside of a school, and we walked from the classroom to a riverbed, and we're pulling out invasive species. So those are transformational experiences for students, when you can go into nature that is literally a 10-minute walk away and have an impact on cultivating a natural environment.
Thank you for being so clear and structured in the 4 pillars. I can tell that you're a system thinker. And I think it's so important to teach the students the interconnectedness of everything. I think it's so easy in today's society to get disconnected. You get served a piece of meat in a piece of plastic, and there's no connection to make you understand that this choice is part of a bigger system. So thank you for doing that. And I want to ask you about the food system change, but before that, I have one thing that made me curious, and that is, Like, what from your point of view is preventing the students from seeing the bigger picture? Like, what is your struggles in reaching them?
I think it depends on the school, it depends on the students. But I think it's hard to get out into nature for many children. There's been a migration in largely to cities and suburban areas, and we've become increasingly isolated from nature, I think, and disconnected from nature. There's many movements to get kids back into nature. There's movements to build parks in cities that are within walking distance for everybody. And we talk about nature deficit disorder. There's been studies on the impact of nature on your well-being. And so, I think that in large part our environment prevents many people from accessing nature and those experiences. I think also education has transformed so much to date. I mean, I don't know what the time frame is. It's transformed a lot, and it's very focused on tests and learning specific things around math or earning language, English language arts in the U.S. or science, but there's an opportunity to connect nature and the food system and systems thinking when you're teaching about any of these things. And I just think that the education for sustainable living movement and connecting education to nature is important to cultivating a culture that can do that in education. So I don't know if that fully answers your question. I guess in summary, it's cities, it's our urban design, it's where people live. And I think it's the design of education. I think we have an opportunity to rethink about how we teach math, science, language, and we can integrate nature into those things.
Yeah, I think that's highly necessary. So teach me about the food system change that you want to accomplish.
Haha.
Haha.
Food system change, very hard.
And needed.
We were, it's so needed. Yeah. And I think this is such an amazing moment to be doing this work as well. Both, from a health perspective, an environmental perspective. And there's an acute awareness about the need to reform our food system that has become increasingly mechanized and distant from the consumer. So we work in public K-12 schools, primary and secondary schools. And in the United States, we have the National School Lunch Program, which is run by the United States Department of Agriculture. And I would say, the majority of public schools offer school lunch in this way. So we work in that space. And we believe that if we can create small changes around promoting and supporting school districts and serving freshly prepared meals made with locally sourced ingredients, that it will build the capacity and the commitment of school districts around the country to do more of that. So the food system, many people have probably heard that schools have, it's gone up over the years, but let's say they have about $1.50 to spend on a lunch for students. And you might think, well, what can I do with $1.50? I had to go to the grocery store to build a whole lunch. Fortunately, school districts are buying at large scale, so costs go down. But what we're really focused on is transforming what they're serving and where they're procuring their food from. So, valuing in their procurement local and human like welfare and animal welfare. So we're trying to infuse values into the food system in school. and to promote a connection between the cafeteria and the classroom, so that school lunch, school breakfast, snacks are all learning opportunities in the educational day. So this is a big system that we're trying to transform. We have an initiative called California Food for California Kids, and it's based in California. In California, we serve over 1 billion meals a year in K-12 schools, and the value of those meals is over $2.5 billion. So, there's a sort of a famous quote that has been going around that school districts are the biggest restaurant in any city, and nobody knows it. Mm-hmm. So, they're buying for thousands and thousands of meals a day. Some districts, big districts like Los Angeles, are serving over 100,000 meals a day. If you can make one small change in the system, it impacts, like, let's say they're, decided to purchase California grown wheat for their bread. Then you're supporting California wheat growers with 100,000 meals potentially a day. Not that they're serving that every day, but you have to both build the capacity of the system to meet the needs of school districts, and you have to build the capacity of school districts to change their food and integrate it to education. So that's what we're working on in California.
Thank you. Yeah, that seems like there's a huge need to start changing the system to be better for both the environment, animals, humans. It would be interesting to see how eating more fresh and local and healthier food will also affect the brains of the students. I mean, my guess is that it could have a huge impact.
Absolutely. A well-nourished student is more ready to learn. There's lots of science behind that, and it impacts their attendance and their behavior in school. And for many of the kids that are participating in these lunch programs, they come from food insecure homes, and this could be the best nourishment that they get all day. So improving the quality of the food to more fresh ingredients can have a huge impact on millions of students, tens of millions of students in the United States. And I know that there's a movement all over the world to improve the quality of school meals. I think that school meals largely reflected what happened to our food system over the past, 70 years now, where, we went to more processed packaged food. And the thought was, let's reduce labor for, the end producer, producing the meals. And, it created a very centralized, mechanized system that we're trying to dig our way out of. And, it's amazing. Many of the school districts that we work with are purchasing so many, beautiful ingredients in their towns or in their counties from farmers that they know. And many of those farmers come to the school district, and they have events where they can meet the students and tell the students about their job and their land. And that kind of goes back to the importance of place, that students understand that the food was grown nearby by somebody in their community. And the school district can bring those dollars that they spend back into the community, which has an impact on, it's the multiplier effect. And there's different numbers out there, but, ultimately, when you keep money in your local economy, it has a multiplying effect on that dollar.
Yeah, and that if anything is to show the students system thinking instead of telling them about it, and that's really cool.
Exactly.
I wish we had more time to go into policy space, but we're unfortunately running out of time for this interview. But I really want to know, what can someone do as an individual to promote more sustainable living, both in their own lives but also in their community?
I just wanted to say one more thing about policy, and
Yes, go for it.
just because it's important. So one of our board members is the state senator Nancy Skinner, and this year she introduced Senate Bill 364, which is a universal school meals bill in California, and the intention is to provide school meals for all. It's called School Meals for All, and so the work that we've been doing in school food reform has percolated up to the Senate in California, and we're hoping that the work in California can be an example for other states and the nation for offering fresh, healthy meals to all students. So thanks for letting me get that in. I just think it's really important, and it's an inflection point, I think, in the work that we're doing. But what can somebody do to promote systems thinking in their life? Was that your question?
I want to say thank you again for inspiring this change that could have a ripple effect into other states. I was asking, what can someone do in their own life to promote a more sustainable living and system thinking?
That's a good question. Well, I think understanding that everything's connected, doing some reading on systems thinking. There's some good books. I mean, there's just some really great articles on our website that anybody can access from great thinkers like David Orr, Wendell Berry, Michael Pollan, and one of our co-founders, Fritjof Capra. So there's a lot of information on our site that can inspire people to think in terms of systems and to think about the community that they live in. I think tied to our conversation about food systems, look for local food, buy local food, meet the people that grow your food, go to a farmer's market. If you have kids, learn about how they're being taught and get to know the other kids in the class and the teacher and the school community. It builds community. And I think an awareness that you're part of a system, just that awareness can have an impact on the choices that you make in your life. And yeah, get out into nature. That's the best example.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, I agree. Nature is the best example. So Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with Great today. We highly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And for you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that is showing the algorithms that this conversation is important. So more and more people can learn about sustainable living, learn about system thinkings, so they can understand that they're not only a part of nature, they are nature. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. What is great.com? That is the most common question that we get. And the shortest answer I can give you is that we are a company that is moving money from the online casino industry and donates it to charities that is helping the environment. The long answer, unfortunately, I don't have time to tell you today. But if you're curious, definitely Google what is great.com to learn more.